Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. It's another Enough Already podcast. My name is Fingers Malloy. Thank you so much for finding us on Apple Podcasts, or if you're a Droid person, wherever you find a podcast on Droid, we'll be there. Droid systems, operating systems. Droid, Tracy L. Connors.
Yes.
There you go. Also, you can find us, of course, on YouTube and BitChute. By the way, and we have a lot to talk about. Halloween is coming up this week.
Yes.
Tracy, and I could not be more excited. This is my favorite holiday of the year. Because as a red-blooded American male, I love that all of you basic Beckys out there channel your inner tart and dress like hookers. So, thank you for that. Do you do that at all, Tracy? Do you dress like a tart for Halloween?
Nope.
No?
No.
Did you ever dress like a tart for Halloween?
No.
No, not at all.
Nope.
I took my 10-year-old daughter to a party store by my house. Not like party store that serves liquor, but you buy the party stuff, and they have Halloween costumes, and they're going out of business, so everything was 90% off. And when you have a store like that, you consolidate things. And so they had the children's Halloween costumes next to the slutty nurse costumes. So that was a fun walk.
It's like, Daddy, I want to be a slutty nurse.
Yeah, exactly. Daddy, what's a streetwalker? But Halloween's coming up, and I'm very excited. Joe Biden's excited. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But we've been talking about this for some time, about how the political left in this country is dragging the Democratic Party further and further into crazy town. And Tracy, you have a couple of things that we discussed in show prep that we really need to talk about. First of all, Bill Maher seems to be the voice of reason now in a lot of ways for the political left. And he went off. Yeah,
he did. And I don't know if this is a new thing for him, though, Fingers, to say that he's the newfound voice of reason for them. I think he's been kind of beating this drum since Trump got into office, and maybe even before that. But it's now just, he's matching their hysteria with his hysteria about their hysteria.
Yeah, he's coming out a little bit more. He's becoming more vocal in his pushback against some of the crazy that's coming out, because we're getting close to an election, and obviously he doesn't want Donald Trump reelected. And he's seeing some troubling signs coming from the political left.
Right. Well, and I don't think that there's any chance they're going to listen to him. They're too far gone at this point.
It is amazing how much, and do you have an audio clip of some of the things that he was saying on real time? Because, and maybe not necessarily in this clip, but when he does drop truth bombs, Tracy, the kids call them truth bombs. When he does drop truth bombs when it comes to the left moving the Democratic Party further and further left and into crazy town, the crowd gets kind of silent and they don't know what to do, because they're usually used to clapping like seals when he says something, and they're like, "Are we supposed to applaud this?" Don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it could be that he has that crossover audience from the CNN Equality Town Hall in that and that's not the right audience for the message that he's sharing. So I'm not starting this clip from the very top because it's 7 minutes long, and I don't know that we'll even make it through the 6-minute version that I have queued up. But just to let you know what he's talking about, he starts this by saying, in America, we basically have two choices when it comes to politics. There's the Democrats and then there's the Republicans. And, he's begging Democrats to get their act together so it makes it okay to vote for them and not for Trump. So here we go.
You have to vote for me anyway. Whether you love me or hate me, you got to vote for me.
The question Democrats must ask themselves is, what would make a voter say, Trump's right, I don't like him, but I have no choice? Well, let's go down the list. Bernie Sanders says we should let the Boston Marathon bomber vote. Why? Is there a great clamoring to give deranged serial killers more of a voice in civil society? Is Hannibal Lecter thinking, I love Trump for his narcissistic personality disorder, but Sanders really gets voters like me?
But you're right, though. The audience is not really on board with this.
Right?
They can't even laugh at this idea that it's absurd to be demanding voting rights for a terrorist. All right.
Now, I'm sure you can make an argument for this, but we're trying to win an election here, and this just feeds into what Trump is selling.
Democrats are now the party of crazy politicians. Crazy Democrats. They're crazy. They're crazy.
Hey, Democrats, don't make him believable on that, and you win.
Okay.
Elizabeth Warren has not come out in favor of imprisoned serial killers voting, but she does want taxpayers to cover their sex change operations in prison. Which brings up the question, if you tried, could you come up with a policy with more third-rail buzzwords in it? Let's see, taxpayer-funded sex change for prisoners. No, I don't think you could. And again, where are the votes in this? You know how many transgender people there are in federal prison in America? 473, and they can't vote. So we're taking this position because it makes a great campaign slogan? Commit a crime, get a free dick. Commit a crime and your new vagina is free. So let's imagine a slightly different scenario. You're a progressive voter who likes Elizabeth Warren. You drive a Prius, hate guns, and buy kale in bulk. But you find out that Warren does not support taxpayer-funded gender reassignment surgery for convicts. So that's it? Deal breaker, you're voting for Trump now? Of course not. This is the binary thing Democrats don't get, because apparently they never saw the movie An Officer and a Gentleman, where a drill sergeant forces Richard Gere to admit the same truth that Democratic voters need to face.
I got nowhere else to go!
But the same can be said about the right, too, right?
Oh, absolutely. How many people have we talked to that... and I'm not talking about the Never Trump gang, but people who were Ted Cruz supporters, who were Marco Rubio supporters, who, after it was clear that Trump was going to be the nominee, at first they were apprehensive, but when they drove to the polls, they held their nose and they voted for Donald Trump because they see how far the left is moving the Democratic Party, and that was in 2016. Before a lot of the new brand of crazy has taken over the Democratic Party.
Right. Yeah, they weren't advocating for this madness in 2016.
Oh, I could tell you, I have seen on several occasions on social media the smart blue checkmark crowd on the right. Many of them I've seen say, I did not vote for Trump in 2016. I would crawl over broken glass to vote for him in 2020 just because of what I've seen going on with the Democratic Party the last few years.
Well, and I think Maher's missing a big player in this whole game, or at least we're told that there's the independent voters. He's not even trying to talk to them. He's got to keep all the Democrats corralled. It sounds like at this point. I mean, this message is directed at them. Stop making everybody to go super far left to get your vote. But he never comes back to it. Like, then they have to tack back to the middle, and how do you walk back from that? I mean, that doesn't even come into play in this.
I don't know how you walk back from the middle to the middle from the far left when you have given the political right and the Republican Party and the Trump campaign all of this ammunition just on CNN infomercials.
Right.
Between the climate change infomercial and the LGBTQ infomercial, I mean, we joked about it, and I know it upsets some people, but the LGBTQ infomercial, as I like to call them, there were parts of it that looked like it was ripped straight from Jerry Springer.
Mm-hmm. And they thought it was a good idea.
Yeah, exactly.
I am just shocked that out of the entire consultant class, there's nobody working in any of these campaigns. It's like, I don't think we should go there. I don't think we should do that thing. Like, we can target stuff at people and make ads to go, pick up each one of these little constituency groups. But walking into something that turns out to look like Jerry Springer is probably not the best idea.
Well, you had Bernie Sanders call in heart attack for that LGBTQ infomercial. But it makes you wonder if there is a consultant class out there in the Democratic Party that at least privately is saying, well, why did we lose in 2016? And let's lose all the noise about Russian interference. Why did we lose in 2016? And what can we do differently in 2020? And, being a casual observer of politics and someone who has been writing and talking about it now for 10 years, I would say that maybe you should craft a message that would appeal to voters in states that you thought you were going to win in 2016, but you lost. Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin. And they didn't lose Minnesota in 2016, but they came awfully close to losing Minnesota, which should be alarm bells should be going off everywhere. How can we win these voters back? And what we're seeing so far, they're not interested in winning those voters back. They're more interested, it seems, as though they're interested in keeping their base wokety woke and making sure that they show up at the polls.
Yeah, but I wonder if there's any threat of the wokety wokes not showing up. I mean, is Maher right by saying, like, are there people that are single issue voters, and that issue is whether or not prisoners can get gender reassignment surgery at the taxpayer's cost? I mean, does that exist on the left? I don't know.
Look, I think that the only thing that will happen on the left, and I could be totally wrong, is this. If they think the system is rigged on their side, they may stay home. If they think that their particular candidate was being shut out by the DNC and media elites, then maybe they will stay home. I do not understand why Bernie Sanders is participating in any of this other than he wants another beach house. He should be running independent right now and flipping the Democratic Party and corporate media the bird as he is running for president as an independent. I don't understand why he's going to play nice with the Democratic Party and CNN again, because he's not going to win the nomination. Now you have other candidates who have stolen his platform, who are younger, who aren't his gender, who
heart attack,
have a heart attack, who aren't 80, that I'm sure the Democratic Party and the media elites would rather have than Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders' campaign, the clock is ticking, and there isn't much time left other than, he is raising money, obviously. But I don't see how the system that was rigged in 2016 is somehow going to unrig itself and make sure that Bernie Sanders has a fair shake.
No, now it just seems that the rigging is all directed at Tulsi Gabbard. Like, they know Bernie doesn't have a chance in hell, so why bother with him? He just won't go away, and there is a ceiling on his support level, so maybe they're hip to his game. But this is just beach house number 4, or whatever we're up to right now. But, I mean, honestly, like, the amount of time they spend trashing Tulsi, it's just disproportionate to the 2% that she's getting in the polls.
It is, and you have to wonder what her end game is. I mean, it was nice for Hillary Rodham McCarthy Clinton to come out and call her a Russian asset, along with Jill Stein. Tracy L. Connors is a Russian asset. There's so many Russian assets out there that Hillary Rodham McCarthy Clinton is pointing to as to why she will either lose. She lost in 2016, or the Democrats will lose in 2020. It's comical, but I think that the Gabbard campaign has done a good job elevating herself by picking this fight with Hillary Clinton. It hasn't really helped her much in the polls. She's gotten a little bit of a poll bump from what I've seen. But, she's not running for her congressional seat.
Right.
So what's the end game for Tulsi Gabbard? Is she all in with the odds stacked way against her, or is this another person that's running and plans on, after the campaign is over, will have a sweet media gig?
I don't know. I don't know that she gets a sweet media gig. The media really hates her. Everywhere she goes on TV, she's confronted with, the line before Hillary came out and turned her into a Russian asset was that she was an Assad asset or an Assad toady and a suck up and all those kind of things.
Well, would Fox News hire her as a token lefty?
Maybe. But I don't know. I mean, does she go on to bolster the Green Party's status and join them? I mean, that seems to be where she should fit. And she'd be in good company with fellow Russian asset Jill Stein over there.
I don't know enough about the Green Party base to wonder if her military career would hurt her in the Green Party.
Well, I mean, she's pretty anti-war, and she can speak to that from a place of experience, right? Some of the biggest anti-war people on, say, in the Libertarian Party, like Adam Kokesh, who I believe is running for the Libertarian nomination in 2020, he's a military guy too. And if you looked at, I think it was in the 2012 election, Ron Paul got more military donations than anybody else that was running, and he was the biggest anti-war candidate on any of the stages that year. So maybe it gives you more credibility.
It could.
But I mean, the Green Party, a lot of Bernie Sanders' platform is stolen right from them. That's the originating point of the Green New Deal in a different form, but they definitely had it called that. Like I watched Jill Stein go defend herself this week on Jimmy Dore's podcast and explain, she was at that thing in Russia. She gave a speech in Russia, and she was like, I was there talking to them about nuclear disarmament and the Green New Deal. Like, I don't think that he was super stoked to have me and his country advocating for those things, Well,
speaking of Russia, and we didn't talk about talking about this before we started recording, but did you catch any of Snowden over at the Joe Rogan podcast? Because I believe he's living in Moscow right now.
Yes, I caught the whole thing.
What did you think of that?
I thought it was really interesting. I mean, I had watched the documentary about him before that was him and Glenn Greenwald. I think it's called Citizen 4 or something. Mm-hmm. So that was really my only kind of exposure to him. And they had filmed that in the aftermath of all this. At the time, I think he was in China maybe when they were filming that. So it was right when he was kind of on the run and nobody knew where he was. And so it was more focused on that and not on his story, which I found to be very, very interesting. And there was the part that stuck out to me when I was listening to him is that he started out, he's a high school dropout and eventually went back and got his GED, but was very into tech. And I think he's about 37 now. So I think he said he had just turned 18 right when September 11th had happened. And at that time, he was working for a woman, doing coding, and I think he was building websites and stuff like this. But she happened to run the business out of her house, which was on Fort Meade, because I believe her husband was in the military. So that's where he was on the morning of September 11th, was on the base, the military base. And he said, right down the road, you've got the CIA and the NSA buildings. And it sounded like, and Rogan never asked him to clarify, so this is just what I think he was saying, is that after the first tower got hit, the word went out, like, everybody's going to get out of this base, get off the base. Everybody in the CIA, for the most part, except for what he referred to as like a skeleton crew, both CIA and NSA buildings, just everybody went home. And there was this massive traffic jam to get everybody out of there because they've got thousands of people that work in those buildings. But his takeaway from that is, wait a minute, these are the intelligence agencies that should just be like locked into figuring out what the hell is going on. Is anybody else in danger? What are the other targets? Are there other targets? But nope, they all just kind of like, whoop, we're out of here. We're going home. We're protecting our own asses. And then after that, he does go and work for those agencies. But I mean, still putting it all together, looking back, I think he had that awakening later on. Like, wow, that was really kind of shady and scary to think these are the people that we trust to protect us. And that's why people are kind of okay with them doing a lot of the capturing of our data and, having the ability to listen to us if they want to and all that kind of stuff. That's all done, or at least, people turn a blind eye to it because they're like, well, they're keeping us safe. And then to think that on the day when we were all feeling the least safe that, at least in my lifetime, I think the country's ever felt, they're hightailing it out of town.
Which is exactly what you would expect from government agencies. To be fair.
I mean, they are given kind of like this special standing and everything. They're special. They put their lives on the line to protect us. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, did you listen to it?
What I love about Rogan is how, he has the full length podcast, and then he'll release the Joe Rogan clips. Mm-hmm. And I watched 2 or 3 of the clips. The one that I was drawn to immediately was how the smartphones spy on you. And, I did read a piece a couple of years ago where someone tried to completely eradicate Google from their life, and they couldn't do it. I mean, they couldn't do it because, forget Gmail. I mean, you got Google Maps. Mm-hmm. Apparently, if you want a Lyft or an Uber, you still have to have Google, because I don't know if it's because of Maps or whatever, but it was almost impossible to completely eliminate Google from your life on your smartphone.
Yeah. And they own Waze now, if you use that to navigate traffic.
By the way, I love Waze.
Yeah, it's great.
But just to listen to him in 25 minutes break down each and every way your smartphone spies on you made me want to take my phone and throw it in my pond and be done with it.
But then you would cry because you're like 30 seconds later, you're like, I really want my phone back.
Yeah. I want to see what Norm McDonald's doing on Instagram right now, and I can't. Yeah. So, but no, I highly recommend going and checking that out because it's a fascinating conversation, and Edward Snowden really can break things down to where you don't have to be a techie to understand what he's talking about. So,
no, the other interesting thing, and I didn't realize this, and I'm not sure if this was one of the clips that you watched or not, but he was talking about how, of course, the U.S. government still wants to prosecute him. And he's been in talks back and forth about coming back. But he said the way that it works in the legal system, he'll be tried under the Espionage Act. And because of that, his defense attorney would not get to put forward any kind of information about his motivation for releasing this. And he's like sitting here, this happened in 2013.
Yeah.
June of 2013 is when these revelations started coming out. And he said he had given more evidence to Greenwald, and I think there was another journalist that was involved, and I don't recall her name, but he'd given them more stuff. And they really sat and thought about, okay, what is going to be dangerous to put out, meaning that people's lives could be on the line if we reveal X, Y, Z. So he's like, there's still more information that we didn't put out because we actually really thought this. And then sitting here 6 years later, the government cannot point to a single thing and say this happened because of the information that Edward Snowden allowed to become public. Mm-hmm. They're not allowed to say any of this in court. So he's like, I'm not coming home because there's no way I'm going to get a fair trial if I'm not even allowed to defend myself properly and explain my thinking and why I did this.
Well, does anyone believe, even if the government agreed to offer him a fair trial, that they would offer him a fair trial once he came back to the States?
I don't think so. No, it's really sad. Like, that's how degenerated our system has become, that you can't trust that would happen. And he's right. If they can't even point to one thing, I mean, they're not even bothering to lie about something and say, oh, this is because Snowden put out that information. We would have avoided this attack had we been able to have all our systems running. I think they still have them all running anyway.
Which is amazing because some poor schmuck who came up with a YouTube video somewhere was blamed for the Benghazi attacks. Mm-hmm. And actually, what was it, 6 months in jail or something? I can't remember what.
Yeah, they got him on a parole violation after Hillary promised the father of one of the I think one of the people that was killed in the firefight that ensued. She promised him at the funeral, or, when they were receiving the bodies back at Andrews or whatever it was, that we're going to get the person that put that video out and put them in jail. And he's like, for what? And they found something because that guy, the parole violation was that he used a pseudonym on the video. And because he had identity theft, I guess, was the crime that he had committed prior. He was not allowed to use any fake names. No, that's how ridiculous it is. If they want you in jail, they'll find something to throw you in jail for.
What's that book? 5 Felonies a Day?
I think it's 6, but
6 felonies a day, where it claims that most Americans commit 6 felonies a day because there's so many laws on the books that Americans don't even know exist. Mm-hmm. It's another one you should check out. But going back to, you just brought up Hillary Rodham, McCarthy, Clinton. You found a piece that I found very interesting regarding this whole. We talked about this last week, where there's a new play in the playbook from the 2016 election. It used to be my opponent. If you're a Democrat and you're talking about a Republican, you say my opponent is a racist, he's a sexist, bigot. He hates everything that we stand for. He hate diversity. Well, now the new shiny new toy in the toolbox, shiny new toy in the toy box is calling someone a Russian asset, even though the whole Russian thing has been completely debunked.
Right.
Enough people on the political left still want to believe that Putin is pulling some strings and influencing our elections and the national debate, that that new smear is something that probably won't go away for some time. And you found a piece. Where's this? The Moscow Times?
Moscow Times, yeah.
Is that a Russian asset?
Of course it is. Everyone's a Russian asset. And I was thinking about that. I wonder if there are any good Russian asset Halloween costumes.
Ooh, slutty Russian asset.
Well, aren't they all, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know that Jill Stein would qualify for that, but I'm sure there are plenty of young men that would like to see Tulsi Gabbard dressed up as a slutty Russian asset.
That wouldn't suck.
You guys are so easy.
We're simple creatures.
I know, I get you. All right, so yeah, Moscow Times. It was an opinion piece by a gentleman named Mark Galeotti. And the title is, Putin's useful idiots are those who call others useful idiots. So he says, those accusing Tulsi Gabbard of being a Kremlin asset should take a long, hard look in the mirror. So he says, never mind Donald Trump and his bizarre fondness for Putin. Is there anyone who is more of a Russian asset in U.S. politics today than those who so eagerly call each other, quote, agents of influence or useful idiots or mouthpieces for Kremlin talking points? Yeah, I don't think so. Hillary Clinton and her team have suggested recently that both Jill Stein, the Green Party presidential hopeful, and Tulsi Gabbard, perhaps the most unconventional candidate in the Democratic primaries, are being, quote, groomed by the Kremlin as spoiler candidates. Her evidence appears to be simply that the Russians have a bunch of sites and bots and other ways of supporting her so far. So he continues, this seems to be nothing but smear, and even Gabbard's rivals in the race seem to be keeping away from this particular mud bath. But it demonstrates a wider and worrying problem in Western and above all U.S. political discourse. So he goes on, but I thought he had this really great point sort of near the end, and I'll put this up on the show notes page, of course. He says, by elevating Putin into the role of master puppeteer, able to bend minds and shape politics to his will, it gives him vastly more credit than he deserves and contributes to the fears of those who argue that it is better to give him something of what he wants in the hopes of satisfying him. In short, without minimizing the impact of Russian efforts to poison Western debates, we need to recognize how our own toxic politics are often vastly more harmful and effective. The most useful idiots often turn out to be those who don't realize how much they are empowering their enemies. Yep. They're all a bunch of fools.
I got to thinking about this the other day. If we did have some sort God forbid, of another 9/11 type attack, would that be unifying?
No.
I don't think so either. I mean, it united us as a country for maybe 3 weeks back in 2001, and then it began again. People trying to tear the country apart, and corporate media is responsible for a lot of that. But do you? Because of this, it's one thing to say you don't love this country. It's another thing to accuse someone of being an asset of a geopolitical rival. Mm-hmm. I don't see where we return to a point where at least we could have unity is impossible, but I don't know if we're ever going to get to a point in this country where we're not living in this sort of cold civil war.
Yeah, I don't see how it ends peaceably. And I don't think that, I mean, I guess it would depend on the scale of the attack and who was behind it, if we could even believe it. I mean, anymore, that would, I think, would be the main problem. You would have, first off, I don't think it would be this instant solidarity moment where everybody's just, looking for some kind of safety and are willing to just kind of bond with their neighbors and rally around the flag and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like we're in this together. I think it would immediately descend into fighting about who was responsible for it, and then blame being thrown all around. And then, I don't know, does the cold civil war go hot at that point?
Do you think that ever happened? The only way I ever see us really breaking into some sort of hot civil war is the Second Amendment stuff.
I don't know. I mean, the impeachment stuff kind of scares me. And thinking if they're actually able to pull that off, which I don't think that they will be, but I don't know. Are people just going to accept that? I don't know that the Senate would vote to remove him from office, but that gets pretty damn contentious. And it's just like, why would we trust these institutions anymore? Anybody that voted for him, that, you look at who wants him removed and who doesn't, it's a partisan breakdown.
But don't you think impeachment would be the death of the Republican Party?
If the Republicans in the Senate went along with it, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
But what happens, I mean, you look at, they're trying to run the Nixon playbook again, right? They're obsessed with that. And they've been talking about the Nixonian, the comparing Trump to Nixon this whole time for 2-3 years. I mean, CNN running specials about Nixon impeachment. I'm serious. They have been. And this is what they go to. During that David Plouffe interview, he talked to Hillary about it. He's like, well, you've been through now. This is the third impeachment for you, because she worked on the impeachment hearings as a staffer back in the 70s. And so you probably have some really good advice for all of this stuff. Yeah, right. So anyway, yeah, where were we? If the Republicans are going to go along with it? No. Oh, so Nixon gets reelected by a huge landslide, and then they start the march for this. So say that they don't get, I think the window is closing fast on getting this done in this calendar year, which I think they need to do. I don't know that they can drag this into the election year, but I don't know also how they walk away from this gracefully at this point. I mean, it's like, how do you walk back saying you're going to give gender reassignment surgery to prisoners at taxpayer expense? I don't know how you retreat from that position. So if they don't get it done this year and then say he gets reelected, do they give it up? I guess it depends on, if the Republicans win back the House, it's kind of a done deal at that point. But if they don't.
Here's the thing, too. There is such little trust in our institutions in this country, whether it's the corporate media or it is the FBI, the Department of Justice. What's going on with the impeachment inquiry and in the House right now. I feel as though they could really find something on Trump that's impeachable, and a large section of Trump supporters won't believe it because we've been lied to for years about the Russian hoax. It looked like the deck was stacked against Trump before he even took office. They could come up with evidence that Donald Trump poisoned Elijah Cummings. They could throw that out there, and I think that even if they had evidence of something crazy like that, there would be a lot of people on the right that'd be, okay, they're making this up. Now, he poisoned Elijah Cummings. We're going to go with that. And they could have photos of him actually putting the poison in his tea. And
fake.
People wouldn't believe it.
Yeah. No, you're right.
I think unfortunately, that's where we are at this point, where you've had the Department of Justice, the Internal Revenue Service politicized to where people believe, and for good reason, that our federal agencies are partisan now. Mm-hmm. And then you've seen CNN go completely in the tank for the Democratic Party. I honestly believe, even if you had some compelling evidence that Trump did something really sinister, a large portion of the population wouldn't believe it. And then, like you said, where would we be at that point?
Right. And I don't want there to be a hot civil war. That's not my end game. I would like to just have a peaceful divorce. Irreconcilable differences. Seriously. I mean, how do you compromise with these people? Let's let the terrorists vote. No. Yes. I mean, where does that go? There's no middle ground there.
And you have a state like California that's more concerned about how North Carolina feels about abortion than actual shit.
Right.
Human excrement on their streets. They're more concerned about the politics of North Carolina or South Carolina than they are the fact that they have homeless people shitting in the streets. And they have now apps where you can look. It's like a Waze for poop. And you can... You can maneuver through the streets of San Francisco with this app dodging shit, and yet people in California government are more concerned about the politics of states on the other coast than poop.
It's priorities, man.
Well, it's easier, isn't it? It's easier to sit back as a city council and condemn the sitting president than it is to get people out there to power wash the streets, because you have some crazy out there that says power washing is just like the civil rights movement of the 60s, and it looks like people are taking out the fire hoses. I mean, it's madness between city, state, government in California. I just don't know. Like you said, I don't know where's the middle ground there.
Right. And to your point earlier, nobody has any credibility anymore. Nobody's believable, or at least half the population's not going to believe them. And like that's, Scott Adams has been talking about that since before the election in 2016. He had put forward this idea that we live in different realities. He calls it two movies, one screen. And there was a story that I found this week that was in Reuters that they did this polling. And it's like, if you watch Fox News, you think the economy is really good. If you watch MSNBC, you don't.
Yeah.
And which is just stunning to me. And I guess I don't watch news pretty much anymore. I don't, but I live in the world and I work in manufacturing. So I'm presented with this every day, like the reality of what's going on economically. So I was thinking to myself, like, these people that watch MSNBC and hear all the doom and gloom stuff, do they only then spend time around other people that have heard that, so it's just reinforced? Because my guess is they're not doing too poorly themselves. Like, I don't know what the demographic breakdown is of people that watch that channel, but I would imagine that they're probably educated and they're making a decent living and all this stuff. So is it they have an inability to look around and see like the help wanted signs everywhere and construction booming and that kind of stuff? or they just think it's just so far removed. They hear the Democrats talk about people working 4 and 5 jobs, which is physically impossible. There aren't that many. We're limited by hours in the week, right? I mean, 2 jobs. Okay, so you could work 16 hours a day. All right, that's plausible. 3 jobs, so you're working straight 24.
Tracy, you're not thinking of Jennifer Smith, my neighbor. I just had a conversation with her. She has 17 children, Tracy. And to make ends meet, she gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning and takes her 16 children to daycare. Did I say 17?
She pays $2 million for it.
She takes them to daycare to start one of her 8 jobs that day, and she's gone from 4 o'clock in the morning until 6 p.m. where she picks up her kids at daycare, spends a half an hour with them, and then takes them to a second daycare where she starts her 7th job, and she works until 3 a.m. and does it all over again the next day. What about Jennifer Smith,
and
Tracy?
She drives Uber or Lyft between the jobs, right?
Yes. Anything to make a buck to support her 18 kids.
She doesn't exist.
I just talked to her. Are you calling me a liar?
Yes, I am.
I think part of it is, okay, I'm doing fine. But so much of the left is based on someone else's struggle and someone else's problems. And so I need to be a part of some sort of movement to make life easier for someone else that's not me. And so when there aren't a lot of problems, and let's face it, we still have racism, obviously, sexism, it hasn't been eradicated. But when unemployment's at 3.5%, and people, you just mentioned you're in manufacturing. I'm in manufacturing as well. I've got friends who are in manufacturing who tell me that they can't hire good people. It's getting harder and harder to hire a good workforce.
Let me guess, the starting wage is more than $15.
Yes, absolutely. And it's still tough to keep people.
Right.
Even at that wage, jobs are everywhere. So it's hard to point at economic conditions right now and say, wow, it's really tough out there. So they gravitate to these other issues that don't affect nearly as many people, but they have just as much passion about those as they would if the unemployment rate were 15% and they were talking about jobs. I mean, it's amazing how you don't hear much about the Fight for 15 movement anymore.
Nope. I mean, the Democrats have brought that up in the debates. You know, Bernie Sanders for sure, and he put out his transformational economic policy this week. What he's going to do, and I did take the time to kind of breeze through it. And I know this will shock you, fingers. We have to raise the corporate tax rate back up to 35%.
Of course.
But here is where, I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, where we talked about how the left never seems to understand the consequences of their they don't. I mean, they really, really don't. And here was another example of this. So one of the things that he's calling for is that any big corporation that makes more than $100 million in revenue, they need to turn over board seats to workers. They want at least, I think it was 20% of all these corporate boards should be made up of workers. Workers get a vote, all this stuff. They get stock in the company. The company has to buy stock, which they're all mad about, companies doing these stock buybacks. They need to give the workers enough of it so that they control 20% of the company. But then I'm sitting here thinking to myself, oh, and they have to get, they get dividends paid out and all this kind of stuff on the stock that they own of the company, but they're not allowed to sell the stock that they own, which was strange to me. It's just like, okay, so we've given all the workers stock, but they can't sell it. It's held in a trust or something. I'm like, well, that's kind of weird, but right. And then they're going to get dividends paid out, and the way that dividends come into existence is profit, right? Mm-hmm. But then you're going to go turn around and raise the corporate tax rate up 35%. I mean, how do these things even make it into the same plan? We're going to give the workers control of the company and more money and all this stuff, but then you're going to tax them at a higher rate. It doesn't make any sense. And I don't know where you get the authority to go around and tell companies like, hey, you must put these people on your board. And what the hell do they know? In all honesty, like, not to talk down about workers and stuff like this, but I don't know why they think that the shop floor has enough of an idea of how to run something that they should be sitting in a board with something to say. I mean, it's like, why would you put Hunter Biden, the guy that got thrown out of the Navy Reserve, he showed up for work the first day that he reported. I don't know if you know this, Fingers, but he had to get a special waiver to join the Naval Reserve because he was over the age limit. And then he's show up. This is my favorite story. So there was this big, long New Yorker piece about him that I read. And he goes to show up for a report for duty, I guess is what you would say, for the first time. And let me try to find this. And I find this by searching cocaine. No, this story is super long. I think printed out the 29 pages. Here we go. So I just did a Command F and found cocaine in here. Let me see how many times it shows up. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times cocaine. 8 times it shows up in there. So anyway, that's how many times the word cocaine shows up in this bio of Hunter Biden. But this was my argument about him being put on a board. I know people say, well, he doesn't have any experience in the energy sector. And I can tell you from my personal experience dealing with a board, nobody that's on the board that I've dealt with actually has expertise in the industry that they're helping out on. They have other expertise, and that's why you want to have a board. They're supposed to provide you with stuff you don't have internally already. So my argument is, like, who thought it would be a really good idea to put a chronic drug user and an alcoholic and somebody that can't ever is constantly going broke? What does he bring to the table that could help?
Apparently cocaine.
Yes. So this is the story this is what he claims happened and why he was thrown out of the military for testing positive for cocaine. So he's supposed to be going and reporting for duty. And he says sorry. Oh, my God. The night before Hunter's first weekend of reserve duty, he stopped at a bar a few blocks from the White House. Outside, Hunter said he bummed a cigarette from 2 men who told him they were from South Africa. He felt, quote, amped up as he was driving back to Norfolk, and then incredibly exhausted. So he told me that he had called Bo, so his brother Bo is still alive at this time, and said, I don't know what's going on. Bo then drove from Delaware to meet Hunter at a hotel near the naval station. And this is Hunter talking. He got me ship-shape and drove me into the base, he said. On his first day, Hunter had a urine sample taken for testing. So then a few months later, he receives a letter saying that he had cocaine in his system. And so he decides, I didn't know how the drug got into my system. And he suggested that the cigarettes he'd smoked outside that bar might have been laced with cocaine. Of
course.
Yeah, I never bummed a cigarette when I smoked. It always bothered me that people bummed stuff because I like being prepared for things. So I bummed out a lot of cigarettes over my smoking career.
Yeah.
But I've never met anybody that was given a cocaine cigarette by strangers. And especially not like, I mean, this is not, you hear about like GHB and like date rape drugging and stuff like that. I believe that happens, but this, like, 2 randos from South Africa were like, this will be funny. We'll just give this guy a cocaine cigarette and then he's going to leave us so we can't even enjoy what happens to him. This is such bullshit. And there's no pushback in this story at all. And when he sat down for that nice interview on Good Morning America or whatever the hell it was, they certainly didn't ask, like, why would that company want you on their board when you have a history of drug abuse and you've had serious financial trouble? What do you bring to the table?
Yeah, and how, we're all adults here, and we've been around the block a few times. I've never heard a cigarette as a proper delivery method for cocaine, where people are like, oh, you know what, you may love to snort it, but have you ever put a little bit in your Marlboro Red? Woo-hoo-hoo! too. It's a party.
Maybe crack rock. I don't know how that'll work.
Look, and I could be wrong, and people, who are listening to this who have experience with cocaine can tweet me at Fingers Malloy and tell me how great it is to mix your Coke with a Camel Light.
Well, here's the thing. Hunter Biden had plenty of experience with cocaine at this point in his life. So wouldn't you think he would immediately have been like, oh, my God, those guys gave me Coke. I shouldn't report to the Navy tomorrow.
Right.
Come on now, dude. This is such bullshit, but he's a liar. So it's shocking that he didn't go into politics.
Right. Well, hey.
There's still time, I know.
Yeah, there's still plenty of time. But, you bring up something interesting about how employees shouldn't be on a corporate board or be represented. I do believe that corporations undervalue their talent on a plant floor and don't tap the knowledge of the people who do the jobs every day. But that doesn't mean they should be on the board.
No, it doesn't mean they should be making big financial decisions.
Absolutely not. You go down to the plant floor, you find out how they do their jobs, and get suggestions from them on how to make their jobs easier. Mm-hmm. And then you take that, you look at it, you analyze it, you see what would work, what doesn't work, and that's it. Yeah. You don't look at Jim on the plant floor and say, where we could use you.
Up in the boardroom, making decisions about like our 5-year strategy for growth. What are we doing on the marketing side? How are we building up sales? These kind of things.
Right.
I mean, these are people that have, for the most part, either MBAs or at least that, and then years and years of corporate experience dealing with stuff like that. You think, oh, well, I mean, maybe they would get a wake up in the fact that this is where all the money gets spent, because I think there's a huge knowledge gap when it comes to accounting. And I have it. I admit that. Like looking at a balance sheet and understanding what the hell you're even looking at, or looking at, variable overheads, fixed overheads, these kind of things. SG&A. Like I bet if you ask Jim on the shop floor, do you know what SG&A means? No.
Yeah.
Is that the Screen Actors Guild?
No, I freely admit I'm halfway to my MBA, and I know I took graduate level accounting, and I learned just enough to get a B+ in the class, and completely forgot everything that I learned as soon as the class was over.
Right.
So yeah,
you sit down and when I go to board meetings, I look at financials. Like that's what this all is. Mm-hmm. And I think what happens is that you let people in that don't have that kind of even a little bit of an understanding about this, and they just look at that top line. Like I honestly think a lot of times when the Democrats talk about profits, they aren't talking about gross. Or gross and net. Like they don't know the difference.
No.
And so seeing that and like, oh, this company made $100 million last year. Yeah, but how much of it did they get to keep in the end?
Yeah, exactly. I saw an article a couple of days ago, and I will only touch on this for 30 seconds. The GM UAW labor dispute has been settled. And this week, the United Auto Workers are going back to work. But I did see that there was a piece. The third quarter revenue for General Motors was, I believe, $33 billion. I don't have the piece in front of me. And I saw someone comment, oh, look at that. They made $33 billion. As they didn't understand the difference between revenue and profit. They just saw GM had third quarter revenue of $33 billion, and that means, well, they made $33 billion. So when you know that people are out there like that, you tailor your message to people like that, saying, well, listen, we need to raise the corporate tax 30 to 39%, because look at GM made $33 billion in the third quarter. Oh, and by the way, their employees, they should have a seat on the board. And people are listening to it who to particularly pay too much attention to such things as revenue versus profit, or saying, "Oh yeah, they should."
Yeah,
that's
Bernie
right.
Sanders' plan, he's railing against Amazon again, saying they paid zero in taxes and they even got a rebate. And it's like, it's because they're paying quarterlies. Like, I don't think people understand this. You have to pay quarterly income taxes and corporate taxes. And you don't want to underpay, God forbid, because then they'll fine you for underpaying. So if they're getting money back, it's because they send a whole bunch of money in. And the way that they explain this, it sounds like, oh, the government just had to write a check to Amazon for $400 million out of the Treasury. It wasn't like Amazon sent in a whole bunch of quarterly payments, and at the end of the year, they probably did accelerated depreciation. There are other things that you can write off. But, okay, you gave them their money back, and I'm supposed to be angry about this?
Yes,
I buy stuff and it shows up the next day. It's, I have a hard time getting really angry about it. Especially because I hate taxation to begin with. I'm like, good for them. I'm trying. Everybody's trying to minimize their tax exposure, are they not?
Well, but it's different when it's a corporation.
Oh, right, because that's not made out of people. And they act like Jeff Bezos has $3 billion sitting in a vault somewhere.
He doesn't?
No.
He doesn't go in the vault and throw the coins up in the air and the pearl necklaces.
There have been stories in the last week that Elon Musk is basically cash broke. Like, he has nothing. None of this is liquid. And they probably wouldn't even understand what I'm talking about. Like, why are you talking about water? No. On paper, they're worth a hell of a lot of money.
But they're cash poor.
Exactly. I don't understand. He's a billionaire. No.
I would like to have that problem, though.
Yeah, me too. I mean, you just sell off some assets and then you've got money in your pocket, but
right.
Yeah.
But you can understand why this message plays. I mean, when I read that and I saw the first comment was they made $33 billion in profits, it was like, wow, okay.
We know who you're voting for.
Exactly.
Is it Warren or no? It's hard now. Is it Warren or Sanders?
It's interesting to see, and we're already almost an hour in, but I wanted to bring up, you brought up Warren and Sanders. There was a new poll released by, was it CNN that ran this poll that has now has Biden the clear front runner again, which kind of, it kind of slows Elizabeth Warren's momentum, because going into that last debate, everyone was kind of agreeing that Elizabeth Warren was the front runner. And now it looks like Biden has kind of reclaimed that title.
CNN had the story.
Oh, okay. Who ran the poll?
It's a group called SSRS, what I've never heard of before. So hang on, I'm trying to pull it up. But since everybody uses different sizing on their websites, I got to play around with it over here in the software so it fits in the window. So, yeah, this came out on October 23rd. Biden's lead in the Democratic primary hits its widest margin since April. So even though he looks like a doddering old fool, honestly, he does, and he makes less than no sense. What was the clip that we played?
Let me paraphrase it. It was I'm going to lower the capital gains tax. I mean, I'm going to raise it to the highest level, 39.4%, because when you got someone at their kitchen table clipping coupons in the stock market, while Coyote Purple Dishwasher,
and then that guy Corn Pop Pool jumps me again, meets me out in the parking lot with the switchblade. Yeah, I mean, come on. But it says Biden support 34% of Democrat-leaning registered voters. That's where he is right now. It's his best showing in CNN polling since just after his campaign's formal launch on April the 25th.
I go back and forth over whether he is the candidate who would give Trump the most difficult time in a general, or if it is someone like Elizabeth Warren. Because people look at him, and yes, listen, he every week it's a different political flub remark where you scratch your head. He'll go up to, what was it, a month ago, after all this talk about him being inappropriate with women and sniffing their hair and all this other stuff. He walked up to 2 different campaign events and shook a woman's hand and pulled her really close to him and had her look in his eye. Very bizarre behavior. And this latest debate where there were a few times where he would answer a question and it would just be word salad and he would look confused. But he's likable, and
I suppose.
And people in this day and age, the Democratic Party, if they don't continue to drag him to the left, I mean, Joe Biden of 8 years ago looks like a centrist compared to what's going on right now in the Democratic Party. So it makes me wonder if he would be the toughest candidate for Trump to deal with, or someone who is hardcore left, who doesn't, whose ideas may be crazy to a lot of people, but at least they're articulate and are professional and can push back against Trump and try to make him look crazy. I don't know the answer to that question. Who's the tougher candidate?
Do you really think that anybody's going to be able to lay a glove on Trump?
I think Bill Maher actually hit the nail on the head, where you got to make him look crazy.
Right.
And there are times on Twitter he looks crazy. There are times at rallies where he looks crazy. And you've got to do your best to look like the adult in the room without spewing your own crazy. And unfortunately, right now, I look at the Democratic field, and my God, you got Beto O'Rourke running around telling people that, well, people will just turn in their guns, and if they don't, we'll send some stormtroopers in to take their guns. Yeah,
because people follow the laws, Mr. DUI, and I believe he has a theft on his record as well.
Yeah, it's so between that and some of the crazier transgender stuff that's being thrown out there, that if you don't agree with it, you're going to be labeled a bigot. Whether it's 7-year-olds standing up at LGBTQ infomercials asking questions about, again, does this kind of message from the Democratic Party play in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, or does it just win you a few thousand extra votes in California?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Right, and I think you might start losing your votes in California. I've said this before, but talk about Biden being, one to give Trump the biggest run for his money. This is one of my favorite little trolling articles of the week, because the Trump campaign is also populated by people that are really good at trolling. So I guess Joe Biden, his campaign has launched, of course, a Latino outreach program under their campaign's banner called Todos con Biden. That means all of them with Joe. But the dum-dums didn't register the domain. So it's and Breitbart is the Trump campaign seizes Joe Biden Latino outreach website. His campaign didn't register it. Remember where was he? He was giving out a website address, and he's giving it out as like a phone number or something. Like he didn't understand. Do you remember that?
www.areacode392.
So it says the Trump campaign jumped on the todosconbiden.com website and Todos Con Biden Twitter handle to troll the veteran politician's presidential campaign. So on the Twitter feed for Todos Con Biden, they tweeted out, Joe Biden is the king of putting kids in cages. You really think anybody's going to beat this? I mean, come on.
2020 is going to be so much fun. Did you see, I don't want to get into too much, but because I didn't care enough to follow the story, but Trump used the word lynching.
Yes.
And then Biden also used the word lynching to describe
the Clinton impeachment.
And there were people digging up stories from the Clinton impeachment, and there were pictures of Joe Biden with a mullet. Did you see these pictures? It's beautiful. It's everything you would expect.
Wow.
Yeah.
And none of it's his hair?
It's gotta be. And it's still just as white back then as this is now because he's old.
All right.
There it is. He looks like a roadie for Meatloaf.
Oh my God, that's unbelievable.
I don't know.
Oh, that's pretty amazing. I don't
Yeah.
remember ever having hair like that, but that's outstanding.
It is. Well, we're an hour and 5 in. Anything else, Tracy?
Nah, I think we're good for this week.
Remember, you can catch the Enough Already podcast where all great podcasts are sold, and see the Enough Already podcast video version over at YouTube and BitChute. Follow me on Twitter at Fingers Malloy. Follow Tracy on Twitter at Tracy L. Connors. Check out my other show, The Snark Factor, on Wham Talk 1600 AM, 92.7 FM, Sunday mornings in Ann Arbor and on the World Wide Web. Final thoughts, Tracy?
Well, I'm off to Texas, so I'm interested to see what they think about what's going on in the political scene.
Get some good barbecue while you're down there.
Well, I want to see what they think of Beto. And why, I'm going to have to talk to some people about why they allowed him to be unleashed on the rest of us.
Right?
Kept him contained.
It's going to be really fun to see where he ends up after all this is said and done.
Oh, God. Probably on the board of some big company. He has no business.
Yeah. Or, he'll start a ska band and play bass. There's that too. Remember, you can catch the Enough Already podcast on Facebook, Enough Already radio or podcast. Do a search on Facebook. I don't have the address in front of me, and you think I would know it by now. And of course, our website where Tracy posts the show notes, enoughlalready.us. Thanks for joining us. She's Tracy. I'm Fingers. We will be back soon with an all new Enough Already.